Welcome to the second part of the conversation I started last week with Ugonna Emechebe, a man who has dedicated his life to understanding masculinity. If you missed that first part, I highly recommend going back and listening to it because we explored some deep spiritual, uh, albeit existential perspectives. In this episode, though, we are diving into the second half of this conversation, focusing on how masculinity impacts parenting and the crucial role of self awareness in this journey. Parenting is a complex and rewarding path, and understanding ourselves better can make a significant difference. So, let's jump right back in and continue this conversation with Ugonna Emechebe, Bishop.
All right. So even let's see, if you will. It's hard to say this, but I would say let's take it beyond the premise of spirituality. Okay.
Yes.
Even though it's hard, even if it's hard to say that, because fundamentally everything is spiritual. Life is spiritual. Okay. But for
Absolutely.
purposes of this, let's see if we can transcend that a bit. And see what I tell you. This is you've referenced David and Solomon. You spoke about the 12 sons of Jacob. And yeah, okay. So what makes one person turn out right and makes the other person turn out wrongly? Okay. Now let's trace it. Let's go before Solomon. Let's go before Jacob and his children. Let's even go before Abraham. Okay. Let's go way back, even before Noah. From the beginning, you had a situation where we had a man called Adam. Adam began the race, the human race that we are part of. Okay. Now, he had two sons. There was Cain and there was Abel. Cain went a different route. Abel followed a different route. Nothing says to us, nothing shows us, and nothing tells us that there was any favoritism that the father had towards
Cain towards Abel. Yes.
for Abel to turn out right. There was nothing like that. In fact, years later, generations later, we see a clear case of favoritism in a particular context. Yet the favoritism did not seem to produce anything. If anything, it actually took the whole thing down. And that was with Isaac and his two sons, Esau and Jacob. Esau was clearly his father's favorite. There was no doubt about that. Even after all the heartache that Esau brought his dad still loved him. His dad still wanted him to be ahead. He had the preeminence over his sibling, Jacob, as far as his father was concerned. But why did Esau end up the way Esau ended up and Jacob ended up differently? We see that it doesn't even necessarily have to do with the father's background that much. I'll tell you why I say that. Now, as a Christian, I've seen family patterns. I know that Muslims, for example, don't believe in the original sin. And that's another topic. But it does exist. Because, some people will be like, they don't like to hear or to think that it is possible that you are being held responsible for the transgressions of people that came before you. But it happens every time. We see it every time. If I ask you to, Michelle, you either look like your father or your mother. Nobody asked you before you were born who you wanted to look like. Yeah? And so your genotype is a product of a combination of your father and your mother. Nobody asked you what your blood group was going to be like, what your genotype was going to be like. And so you actually are a consequence of their actions. And they are a consequence of the actions of their forebears. And it keeps on going on and on and on. So like it is. So if for example, there's diabetes, God forbid, or there's some sort of condition in your family, it didn't start with you. There's a medical history that started with your forebears, your progenitors before you. Nobody asked you if you wanted that. but it's playing out in your life. The family tree and the patterns are playing out on a daily basis. And people see that. Yet some people want to say they don't believe that there's an original sin. That's all right. But the fact that you don't believe that gravity doesn't exist doesn't mean that when you jump from a 2-story building,
you'll be suspended.
yes, there will not be any effect. So that's the point. If we go back to Adam messed up everything. But the fact that Adam messed up everything did not lead to God condemning his offspring. One followed, in a sense, Adam's intransigence, that is Cain. While the other guy, Abel, who was Adam's seed too, was far more benevolent, far more pious, and followed a different trajectory altogether. Now, you had a situation where you had, years later, Isaac, who was a blessed man with a good foundation, yet he produces, an irresponsible,
reckless... That's up for debate, though.
No. Isaac was, if we follow the fact that, like I said, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, if you follow Isaac's story and Isaac's line, you would realize that there was a blessing that the descendants of Abraham carried. Mm-hmm. And it was transmitted to Isaac as well.
Yeah.
That's unquestionable. But then you find a situation where Esau, instead of taking advantage of that, he goes off on a different trajectory. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, this other fellow, Jacob, now follows and connects to that Abraham's blessing. So you see, why I'm saying this is this. Like we know, who you are is only 10% connected to nature. 90% is all about nurture. The dysfunctionality that you speak about is usually not as much a product of nature as it is of nurture. And nurture is not just what your parents bring to you. Nurture is about the decisions that you make through the entire process. Because you can take a horse to the water, to the stream. Forcing it to drink is a totally different thing. So we have a situation where, when we speak about dysfunctionality, what we need to ask ourselves is, where does this dysfunctionality begin? Because there was dysfunctionality in Adam, but that dysfunctionality did not transcend or did not transmit to Abel. There was no dysfunctionality in Isaac, yet there was dysfunctionality in his first son, Esau. So we now ask ourselves, where did that come in? And that's the important question we must be able to answer. Because I'll tell you why this is very critical. Okay, why this is critical is this: I'm very, very confident that the decisions that we make are the primary factor that will determine the destiny that we have. The decisions we make will, to a very large extent, determine the destiny that we have. So you as a parent will have the responsibility to do your best to lead your child in the way that he is meant to go. But there is also an extent, a level to which that child must play a part. The decision making, the ability for that child to see where he is going, that ability for that child to understand that the process involved in what you're doing is for his making, is going to be a fundamental factor. That cannot be bought in the market. Now, I don't believe that David did not teach Amnon, did not try to teach Absalom, did not try to teach any other person. I don't believe he did not try. Bathsheba, who was the mother of Solomon, also had 4 other sons. She had 4 other sons for David. The Bible lists. Mm-hmm. But many of us don't even know who they are. Their names are not even mentioned. Yeah, there were 4 sons that she had. Is it that she just took Solomon and wanted to only raise Solomon and then leave all her other sons to go? No, I don't think so.
Okay, so I don't want us to, because both of us could get so existential over this, and then we'll just go over it over, because there is I'll be coming from a place of psychology. It's pure psychology, and then you'll be coming from a place of, or how existential you've become with the scriptures.
Yes.
So as we move ahead now, because there's the reality and there's the spiritual, and we have to marry this, because I'm a mother to two teenagers. I have a daughter and I have a son, and they're very different. And there's the origin from their father's side, and there is from their mother's side, right? And somehow, somehow we have to also try to, like you said, build a generation, right? My generation is coming. There's some certain things I don't want from my father's line to be transferred into my children. There's some things I don't want from my mother's side to be transferred into my children. So these things keep going on and on. So these stories, I guess my question is, these stories, in the light of being spiritual, in the light of all of that, how then do we engage the stories and maybe feed less of the wolf that is in us, and feed more of the sheep that is in the children? Because we have, like you said, we have a responsibility.
Yes.
We have a responsibility. However, they also came to answer a question. At what point are we going to, they came to answer the question, so they came into their own manual also. Are we domesticating them according to our own question, or according to the question that they came to answer?
Very important point. Very important point. Very, very, very important point. Okay. Now, why I say that's very important is this. I did say something earlier on. I said your decision, or your assignment is not your decision. Your assignment is your discovery. Now, that doesn't apply to only you. It also applies to every other human being, including, and in your case, and in our cases as parents, particularly and especially our children. So you don't get to decide, in a sense, what your child must be. Now, I know that sounds a bit different to what I said earlier. Talking, for me, what we spoke about in the Medici family. And I'll show you the difference. I'll show you where we build the connection here, okay? Now, I said God is a generational God. So God gives a vision, and the vision doesn't end with one generation. It transits from generation to generation, okay? Now, to the extent that you are meant to ensure your children follow a certain path, that extent is largely dependent on the vision that God has planted in your heart, not your own ambition. Okay? So you're to bring up a child in the way he should go, not the way you want him to go. So the way God has shown you, the vision burning in your heart, what God has told you, because that's why the first priest any child would have, the first set of priests any child should have, should be the parents. The first and the most important set of teachers any child should have should be the parents. So you're meant to discover what this child was born for. And usually, if you have also discovered your God-given vision and what God has called you to, you will see that the cherry does not ever fall far from the tree. You will see that the fruit is supposed to be an extension of the mother tree from which it came. So you're going to find that somehow, with regard to what God has originally designed you to do, there will be certain tributaries which your children, in their own unique flavor and temperament, will take that vision to and take that vision through.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You saw me close my eyes now. It was as if you said something, and then something, you using the tree as a metaphor in the fruit.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
and then I'm going to link it back to you saying what was inside Cain that made Cain do that, and what was inside Abel that made Abel do that. And
yes.
From the same, and what I saw when you used a tree metaphor, what I saw was from a tree, a single tree, one tree, you could have a very tart orange and a very sweet orange.
Correct.
From the same tree.
Correct.
I don't know where that is. I don't know where that thought is going right now, but as you said it.
Correct.
It came, and I'm like, okay, but what could the tree could have done? Because what could the seed? What could have happened to the seed? And the tree that was rooting down and growing up, that we had one tart and one sweet. Okay. I don't know where that thought is going. Just that shit to drop it. Yeah.
I'm following up on your the tree metaphor that we're using. That's perfect. Yeah. We find that, you see, I'll say this, God has a signature. We find God's signature in everything he creates. And I'll tell you what that signature is. God walks in threes. God walks in threes. Everything we see, God walks in threes. And any way you want to break it down, you'll find it. We live in a three-dimensional world. Yeah? So what we find is that in this three-dimensional world, there is space, there is time, there is matter. That's where we are. That's where we live in. Okay? So, at every point in time, as we're speaking now, we cannot be speaking now and be speaking next year. Mm-hmm. We cannot be speaking now and be speaking 10 years ago. We can only be speaking within a certain time frame. Mm-hmm. Now, you cannot be in Lagos and be in London with me, for example, at the same time. Mm-hmm. You can only be in Nigeria while I'm in the UK at the same time, Now, we are occupying different spaces at the same time. You cannot be sitting on the chair on which you're sitting and be lying on a waterbed at the same time. At the same time. Mm-hmm. So that's matter, right? So now when we break this down, and you even notice very interestingly in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, the Bible introduces the whole thing to us, showing us these three dimensions. In the beginning, God created the heavens, space, and the earth, right? So in the beginning, time, God created the heavens, space, and the earth, matter. Now we see these three things. And if you take these three things, you can further subdivide them into three again. So with time, it is always past, present, and future. Okay. There's no other time, no other category. Okay? You can do the same thing with space, right? Space is always height, width, and length. Mm. It's always height, width, and length. Sometimes height is defined as depth, but it's essentially the same thing. So it's always that. With matter, it's always liquid, solid, or gas. Now, everything that we do, we find this tripartite existence. Like man, you are a spirit that has a soul and lives in a body. Mm. We find this three-dimensional aspect every single time. Okay. All right. Now, consider this, and let me show you how it applies to this. In vegetation, for instance, you have a situation where you have the root of the tree. Mm-hmm. You have the shoot of the tree. Mm-hmm. And then you have the fruit from the tree. That's three dimensions. Mm-hmm. It's exactly what you find in the family, the way God designed the family to function. That's how God designed the family to function. There's supposed to be father, mother, and children. The three-dimensional aspect, the signature of God. So now when we apply, you use the tree and vegetation as a metaphor to explain the family. Mm-hmm. Let's take a look at this. The father is the root. the mother usually is the fruit-bearing part of the tree. That's the shoot. Then we have the fruits themselves. Now, parenting is so very, very critical, especially the role of the father. Because the role of the father is a self-sacrificing one. The role of the father is the root where he goes inside the ground and disappears from sight. Most people see a tree. They know instinctively that there's a root somewhere, but you can't see the root. Yet that root serves as the stability and the source of nourishment for the tree. If that root is sick, the whole tree will be sick, even though you can't find the roots. That is why it's so self-sacrificial. And forgive me for being a bit pedantic here, but we find that you guys as mothers have only God knows how many Mother's Days you have. Some people barely remember the single Father's Day that exists. So many times we find, like you see footballers, they finish winning a trophy, they see them hug their mothers and they have pictures with the mothers. And sometimes you think, where's the father in all of this? And the father, in many cases, you find someone like Ademola Lookman, who just won the Europa League, Atalanta, in Italy, and then his manager was telling a story about how his father was working multiple jobs to cover him and to help him to do. And the father at the time, I heard the father was in Canada or someplace, obviously working at the time or whatever the case is. I don't know, But then, what we see is the mother come and then, and that's fine. But that's the design. The point I'm showing is that's the design. It's the tree that's meant to be seen. Any responsible man will understand this and also put himself in a position where he goes under for his wife to be more visible. That's absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with that. As long as everybody understands that it's the root that holds the tree. It's not the tree that holds.
It's not the tree that holds the. Okay, so I want to mine that. I'm very mindful. Yeah,
sorry. Let me just say one thing. I just want to say one thing and why I got into this in the first place.
Yeah.
Because it actually is both father and mother, right? Now, what is that? Every tree begins with the death of a seed. Every tree begins with the death of a seed. You have the fruits that are actually the children. Eventually, the fruits get detached. They get eaten, and then they start their own family.
Right? Their own seed dies also.
Exactly. They cannot start the family without the death of their own themselves. That is, so parents need to die for their children to live.
Okay, you see why we went to command? 2 episodes ago. Look, okay, make that 3 episodes ago. While I was recording that monologue, it just came to me and I said, a choice to parent is a choice to die to self. If you decide to have a child, if you decide to I don't know how else to explain it. A choice to bring a soul to this world is a choice to die to self. And this will lead me to, I don't know if it's going to be the last question. I don't know if I'm going to split this conversation into episodes, but we're going to, this leads me to asking of course, we all know, again, I'm speaking from point of view of psychiatry and psychology. So I know you're a pastor, you'll be fine, we'll do this well. But we know we have several kinds of parenting styles, okay? And so what would you say? And if you wanted me to, I would give some biblical examples of parenting styles. And you already spoke about one. Isaac was quite permissive with Esau. Job was quite permissive with Esau, and we had authoritarian, what Noah did with Ham and Cush in Om. So all of this I represented in the scripture. So it's very, but if in the light of the ultimate manual, which is God's, what would you say is I don't know, because humanology is very interesting. What would you say, though, is the most appropriate style of parenting?
Okay. That was why I started. I said earlier on, God Almighty, in picking a word picture or picking a profile through which he would remember Abraham, who was his friend. Abraham was known for so many things, the father of faith, and so many things, and all that, But God now decides to pick the profile of a father to remember Abraham. That shows us that, as far as God is concerned, Abraham probably was the model father, the model parent, because, of course, God obviously is the model, but how many of us have seen him to know how he parents?
Father.
So he now gives a physical, earthly, biological prototype that everyone can see that would serve to a very large extent as a, very close, image or very close connection to what it is, the closest depiction, if you will, of what the concept of fatherhood and parenting in his mind. Okay, so he decides to pick Abraham. Now, I wouldn't want to break it down to different parenting styles and all that. I would just want to say that in studying the life of Abraham, there's situational leadership. And the way Abraham could not be said to have been a permissive father. He could not have said to have been an authoritarian parent. He could not have been said to have filled any of those niches that, maybe psychologists or psychiatrists and all these people create, to speak about parenting. However, what Abraham did was because, like I said, we see 4 different things that Abraham was able to do to break down his role in the life or the lives of his children. And beyond that, we now find another 5 things that Abraham was able to generate in the lives of his children. For example, Abraham was able to teach his children faith. And the faith was not just about it wasn't just an exercise of verbosity where he was speaking, language or speaking words or speaking grammar. It was by experience. What was that thing that Isaac saw? Isaac, when Abraham was going to sacrifice him, was not a little child. Isaac, at the very least,
was a teenager. Was 13?
He was actually older than that, because some people have done the studies and they found that Isaac was at the very least 18. He was between 18 and 20 as at the time. So this was someone who was strong enough to push it aside the old man. What was this thing that this boy learned? That he would lie down on the bundle of sticks for his father to kill him. That was faith. Whatever the case was, he knew that somehow his father was able to receive him back to life. He had faith in Abraham and he had faith in God. And he was sure that Abraham's faith in God had performed and had worked. So Abraham was able to extend this thing to his son. So Abraham was able to teach. So our responsibility also is not to just take children and let them live through this life as a hopeless life. Faithless, nothing to cast your anchor on. The level of, you began, before we started recording, we were talking about mental health issues and everything. And these things have skyrocketed very terribly. You find lots of young people now having suicidal thoughts, wanting to kill themselves, because for them, there's really no meaning to life. Part of what your faith does is it gives you meaning to life. It shows you that there's something after now. If not, just live without any restriction. So Abraham showed his children the path of faith. Abraham was able to help his children develop an intimacy with him and with God. Abraham was able to teach his children how to care for others, how to be independent-minded, but at the same time be interdependent, so they would learn to play as a team.
Abraham, I would agree that Abraham probably was a good father. And I'll say this is because if we're going to go to his manservants that he led, and he took his manservant as his child. But again, you and I could go on and on if we continue to the Bible. But we've been too serious. So let's talk to, Bishop. Why can't I stop calling him Bishop?
So that's fine.
Let's talk to Bishop the father. It's okay. So how do you think, if I know you have 3 beautiful daughters, so how do you think they perceive you as a father? Have you had that conversation with them?
Yes, I've got 3 beautiful daughters and I've got a very handsome son. Now, yeah. So what it is that I would like to hope I would like to hope that they consider me slightly differently from what I considered my father when I was their age. Now, because my father is a good man. Fortunately, I still have him. He's alive. My mother is dead. My mother is late, but my father is still alive. And then, I now realize certain things that he tried to do for us in the past that I did not realize before. But I also do realize that there's certain things that he didn't do properly. Mm-hmm. But he did everything he could to the best of the knowledge that was available to him at the time. So, in retrospect, there's probably some things he would do differently. Yeah, so I use his life to try to serve as an improvement of my own fatherhood style. So I see what he did with us, and I realize that certain things that if I repeat, would be pure foolishness on my part, because I realize that those things didn't work. Back in the days, you don't ask your parents any questions.
How dare you, though?
You don't try. Whatever you're asked to do, however it is, whether you understand it or not, you just have to. But you see, I realized that I always had questions, even though I did not have the opportunity to express them. I had questions. And the fact that I wasn't able to ask my father questions did not mean there were not other people I was asking those questions. Yeah. So the danger is that I realize that if I don't let my daughters ask me questions, it doesn't mean their questions will go away. I only put them in the position, and my son as well. If I don't allow my children to ask me questions, it doesn't mean those questions evaporate. I only put myself in a position where they go seeking answers from places where eventually will be hurtful to both me and them.
And them, yeah.
So I need to put myself in a position where they can ask me any question. And we can have any conversation, yes.
And it's interesting, and both of us are Gen Xers. So and I know why I know why I'm saying it's interesting, because it looks like a generation was not allowed to ask questions, but we're very curious. We were very curious, very, very curious, and we are the ones birthing another curious generation. We're the ones birthing another set of junior. I almost break out in hives when I hear anything, when people say the term Gen Z with some form of disdain or with some form of, like they are someone that needs to know. And that's the essence of the series, really. And I'm sure that I'm going to break this into two. This is our conversation into two, because there was a lot of spiritual part. And now we're talking the parenting part. So, but before I let you go, because I've kept you, and thank you for doing that. What is the place of self-awareness as a father in parenting?
Okay. What's the place of self-awareness as a father in parenting?
Yes.
Self-awareness is everything. Interestingly, I do a full episode, actually 2 episodes on fatherhood and emotional intelligence. And I spoke about the different components of emotional intelligence, and self-awareness happens to be one of those components of emotional. Yeah. So you see, the thing about self-awareness is this: as a father, as a parent, if you don't have self-awareness, you will not know your strengths. You will not know your limitations, right? In leadership, generally, self-awareness is very critical, because, like John Maxwell said, you may teach what you know, but you can only reproduce what you are. If conscious about who you are, what your strengths are, what your opportunities are, what the limitations are, you will end up transmitting those things from generation to generation. Now, like I tell leaders, usually I tell leaders, because I'm a leadership consultant and I do a lot of that. So I tell leaders generally, you see, there are two terms you must be mindful of. There are two terms you must be mindful of. Yeah. And those terms revolve around how you raise leaders. Okay. The first term is exclusivism. Oh, sorry. The first term is essentialism. Let me say it that way. Yeah. Essentialism is the first term. And then the second term is exclusivism. Now, so you see, both these terms are very important in raising children. And I'll tell you why and how they can apply to self-awareness. Now, one of them says everybody can change. That is essentialism. Everyone can change. Every human being can change. That is the mindset of a transformational leader. Everybody can change. But exclusivism is that part that now says to you that only you can change them, which is a very, very faulty paradigm. It's more like almost like an antithesis of essentialism. Everybody can change, but you must come to terms with the fact that you cannot change everybody.
Yeah.
And the fact that you cannot change everybody does not mean that the people you cannot change are useless and are doomed to fail. So what self-awareness does for you is that it shows you your own limitations and shows you, like a medical doctor, that you might be a gynecologist, but if you have a patient that requires a physician, you need to refer. That patient should be a referral, because your area of skill will not cover the need of that patient at that time. And that doesn't reduce anything from you. It doesn't take anything from you. It just means that you cannot do everything. If you want to be able to teach, for example, if you see that your child has a flair for finances, your child is a business guru and is already innovative, already developing business ideas, and you don't have that in you. Maybe the flair was a dormant trait that the child picked up on from your grandfather, who is the child's great-grandfather.
Okay, so you're speaking to me directly now because I am mathematically challenged. But go ahead, yeah.
So what you want to now do is to find some other person that can help that child make adequate financial decisions. The fact that you're the child's mother doesn't mean it must be you that will groom the child in the area the child should be groomed in, when particularly you don't know anything about that ambit. So what it is as a parent, you must not be exclusive. You must not be exclusive. You must be able to ensure that you carry your child to the place where. So sorry, there are actually three terms. There's essentialism, there's existentialism, and there's exclusivism. You don't want to be the exclusive one. You want to be the one that is existential in that sense. Bringing that child to the point where the child can be within the purview of somebody who has the adequate skill set to help the child
appropriately empowered to live.
Empower the child to become what that should be. Yes.
So this is how I would like for us to round up this conversation. And the story you told about Lukman and fathers and all of that. Personally, I think, and I know a lot of ladies are going to have my head for this. I say it all the time anyways, but I think that just as you say that the man is not cared for enough. either by the society. Yes, the men have a get out of jail card or card, whatever, free on some certain things, character, and especially if you are working on the patriarchate, whatever. But when it comes to um emotional, their emotional space and all of that, this is me. You can correct me because you're a man. I can't speak for them, but this is what I've seen, that men are not giving permission to feel. Men are not given permission to, yeah, that's just it. Men are not given permission to feel. So, what would you say is a place of self-care for a man in parenting? And I would like us to round up with that.
Okay, what's the place for self-care for a man in parenting? You see, like, interestingly, my podcast Manifest is towards helping men, see the profile of the authentic male.
Yeah.
Profile of authentic masculinity. Yeah. So lots of men are under the impression, or maybe not just under the impression, they're actually more like are forced into the mold that society and the media and family and all kinds of people push them into. Yeah. So you have a situation where the man is supposed to be a certain breed, a certain mold. Yeah. And so if he doesn't fit into this mold, then something is obviously wrong with him. So those societal pressures and the pressures in media and everything are the first port of, the first, or let me say it this way, that the first, impediment to genuine manhood. And then you see, if they're the first impediment to genuine manhood, it also goes to reason that they are also the first impediment to effective fatherhood. A man will not be able to raise his child, or raise particularly his son, and also show his daughters the adequate emotional health that is required for them to have in order for them not to fall prey to hopeless, reckless boys later in life. So the man in self-care, he needs to understand, like we just said, I did say something about John Maxwell. You teach what you know, but you can only reproduce what you are. So the first project the man has, is that the man must be healthy. He must understand that his health is just like we said, in using the metaphor of the tree. It is the roots that determines the health of the entire tree. So the man's health, his spiritual health, his emotional health, his mental health, is not something that he's going to be the primary beneficiary of. Everyone in his family will tend to benefit from his health. You see, we grew up, and I'm sure you did as well, in a situation where your father comes in, sometimes he's busy shouting from outside, you hear his horn, everybody takes off under the bed, everybody's jumping from here to there, and everyone's livid. I mean, scared, in trepidation that your father is coming in, and that's a big problem. That's the way we are raised, and that's how we assume that we're supposed to do. Now, sometimes fathers now send and pass across their inadequacies in such ways, making that their children fear them. We just assume that it's better to be feared than to be loved.
To be loved.
Now the child now ends up being afraid of the father. But you see, what it builds is that it ends up only building resentment and rebellion.
Yeah.
Because that fear remains for as long as you are able to inflict pain on the child. The moment you're no longer in a position to inflict pain on that child, that fear goes. Sometimes, even when you can still inflict pain on that child, the fear goes. Some children will be like, what's the worst daddy can do? He will only flog me. Now, if some of them are still afraid of pain, maybe you withdraw their pocket money, you flog them, you do this. By the time that child gets a job, he graduates and leaves, there's really nothing connecting him to you anymore. So as what the father needs to do is, understand that his own health is very critical. How the health of his family, how he relates to his wife. Children, and there's so many studies to show this, children are very emotionally stable and healthy when they see a father that loves his wife. The father loves the mother, and they know this, their security there. Their father loves them. You know, when I was growing up, and maybe that's the case with you, when my father was flogging me, he never told me why he flogged me. He was just be angry. He pulls a belt and flogs the hell out of me, you know? Now, I've come to understand that in raising my children, and particularly this generation we're dealing with, it is necessary to also reason with them. There are times I want to flog my children, even here in the UK that we live in. I want to punish them. I'll explain to them the purpose of the punishment before I beat it out. I tell them, this is what I am looking for. If I don't punish you, this and this and this will happen. I've explained to my children that there are two kinds of pain. I've explained to them, and they know it off heart. Off the top of their head, they can tell you. They know about the pain of discipline, and they know about the pain of regret. They know that the pain of discipline, the pain you get in discipline, is directly proportional to the pain of, it's inversely proportional to the pain of regret. Yes. So, in other words, the more pain you get in discipline, the more pain you avoid from regret.
Yeah.
And so they are aware of it. They know it from the beginning. They are very clear about it. So when I'm punishing them, they know that it's not out of anger. I also do my best not to punish out of anger, because there are words you use, there are things you do that you inflict pain that you can't take back from that child. That child now, it's part of the trauma the child now grows
up with. I know that.
Yes. So now you as a father, you must be whole before you can raise a whole child. You can't give what you don't have. So if you're someone that is short on confidence, you're someone who is always mindful of your inadequacies and your inabilities and everything, or you see in that child something you hate about yourself, and then you now, deliberately try to push it out of the child, and you're doing it through very hard means, you will end up losing that child. You don't want to do that.
You don't want to do that.
Work on your emotional intelligence, work on your ability, and become the best that you can be, and your children will turn out very well.
All right, so Ugonna Emechebe, Bishop to me, and to most of us that know him, is the host of Manifest Tribe. I was listening to it yesterday, and it was a Q&A I listened to yesterday, and your guest or your co-host said something that I wrote down. Yes, I'm looking at it. I wrote down. Said the key to growth is health, and the key to health is balance. And I that was so beautiful. Like, I kept repeating it. I would rewind it, and just like I just wanted to say the key to growth is health, and the key to health is balance. Okay. Right. Bishop went into this on that episode. There's a Q&A, I think it was just about 3 weeks ago. So Manifest Tribe on YouTube, on Spotify, go listen to it and understand how they broke down the key to growth is health, and the key to health is balance. All right. Oh, Bishop, thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on. And there's no how. I'm going to split this into 2 episodes, because the first part was extremely spiritual, and then we went into it. So I'm going to. But thank you so much for honoring me, and I appreciate it. And I hope that, are you coming for the reunion? Okay, we'll miss you for this. Well, hopefully next year.
Yes.
Thank you to everyone who's listened. My name is Oluwatunmise Oladapo, who you know what I say all the time. Love yourself, love your neighbor, love your country. Above all of this, love God. He is the essence of your being. Don't forget to leave us a text or connect with us through via Mindful Tunche on Instagram. Until the next time, stay curious. And it's a wrap. Oh, I'm so excited. I learned so much from that. I hope you did too. I hope this episode has highlighted the importance of self-awareness, on your own parenting journey and provided valuable insight into how understanding masculinity can shape you to be, well, better fathers and, of course, parents to the women who love them. Thanks so much for joining us for these 2 special episodes. If you found this discussion helpful, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your feedback helps us reach more listeners and bring more content that matters. So feel free to share this episode with anyone who you know think might benefit from it, and stay tuned for more enriching conversations. Until next time, take care of yourself and stay curious.